Hi, this is Kasia Zmokła from Digital Art Classes, and you can find me at www.zmokłaphoto.com. In this full tutorial, I'm going to show you how to convert a color image into black and white in Photoshop. I will use black and white tool for the initial conversion, and next I will walk you step by step through all the adjustment layers applied that gave me the final result. This tutorial is part of a full brand new course that I just launched at Udemy, Dramatic Black and White Photography in the Digital Age. If you will find this tutorial helpful, you can get the whole course and learn why photographers shoot in black and white, how to see in black and white, and try out several different conversion methods. The course is loaded with downloadable high-res resources, including the image I will be working on during this class. So let's start the tutorial. In this lecture, we are going to work with portrait of Simona taken in Malta. This is the final result we will achieve at the end of this lecture, and the starting point is this color image. As you can see, the biggest difference is basically in her eyes. They were enhanced with the help of curves. I introduced much more light in her face and in her eyes. I strengthened the reflections. Basically, I lightened the eyes with adjustment layer. So as you can compare with the original image and how it looks like after the black and white conversion, to help the face and the hand to stand out stronger, I needed to darken the background. As you can see, without this adjustment layer, the model is not as strongly significant as after darkening. Okay, so let's start our conversion. I'm going to delete all these layers and start the same as you from a color image. So first of all, let's convert the image to black and white with the black and white tool this time. So let's add black and white tool adjustment layer. You can either add it from the Photoshop menu bar, or you can click this icon here and then from the drop down menu just select black and white. It's just a little shortcut to create adjustment layers. So this is the automatic conversion performed by Photoshop. Let's see if we can adjust it a little bit more with those sliders, if we can do something better manually. Let's try to move this slider maybe a bit towards the left. As you should know by now, dragging this slider to the left hand side will darken all the reds in the image. You can observe this mostly on her lips and nails, as they were pretty saturated. So if I drag this slider to the other side, they will get brighter. I don't like this result at all. I would like to darken them a little bit, maybe not that strongly, because apart from the lips, it will affect her face as well. If I start pushing this slider towards the left hand side, we can darken the lips later with the adjustment layers with curves. So for the moment, I think leaving this slider maybe around 14, it is pretty good choice. Let's now see what can we get by moving the yellow slider. As you can see, it basically lightens or darkens her skin tones. I wouldn't push it too far. I think we can leave it around 45. Yes, it's a good result. Let's try now with the green slider. It's not really affecting the image as there was no green color at all. So let's leave it around -5. Let's now try the cyan slider. It brightens or darkens the background, but notice how it affects her eyes. We want to brighten the highlights in the end, so by dragging this slider towards the left hand side, it darkens highlights and reflections in her eyes in a very significant way. So I'm not going to actually darken the background with using the cyan slider. I will do this later with adjustment layers with curves. At the moment I'm going to leave it maybe around 60, 61 is fine. Let's see now the blue slider. It just gives very similar effect to the cyan slider, so I can actually push it a little bit to the right to make highlights in the eyes brighter, and I will take care of a background later on with the adjustment layers. The magenta slider will darken the reds, so it's darkening the lips a bit, but it's darkening the skin tones as well. So I would leave it, let's leave it around the value 24. Okay, so that way we have the basic black and white conversion ready. Now it's time to apply the targeted adjustments to this image. So let's add some highlights to her eyes. Let's brighten her eyes and let's make them to stand out stronger. In order to do this, we need to add another adjustment layer. So I'm picking from here curves. Okay. Having this layer selected, I'm going to zoom in on our image to have the eyes precisely visible. And now I'm going to sample with the targeted adjustment tool on the brightest part in the eye. So like, let's say here, and on the darkest. Having these 2 points set, now I'm going to drag this point upwards, which is going to brighten highlights in the eyes. Don't worry about the rest of the face. At this moment we are only focusing on the eyes. I will mask them so only the adjustments visible in the eyes will affect the image. Let's try to maybe move this point a little bit upwards. It brightened the eyes a little bit. In the end I will add more contrast to overall image, so I don't need to worry about this if I made the blacks a little bit less dark. Let's see if I can push this point. No, like this, it's too much. I think the value around this point should be fine. Let's see. Yes, already the effect we have achieved is pretty strong. So now let's mask the eyes. I'm clicking on the mask, now Command I, inverting the mask, and now on the black mask I'm going to paint with soft brush with white color. So I'm going to pick brush, pressing B on the keyboard, and now swapping samples, pressing X on the keyboard to swap the color samples. So now having the white color selected, opacity 50 is too strong. I'm pressing 2 on the keyboard to change it to 20, and let's try to paint over her eyes. Okay, so that way, in a very subtle way, I'm building up the effect, just making the eyes brighter. I can widen the mask a little bit more later on, as we are going to work on the rest of the face as well. However, for the moment I just want to have the highlight in her eyes a little bit more strongly pronounced. Okay, so let's leave it like this for a moment. Like, if I would finish work at this stage, they would be pretty unnatural. So let's move ahead and adjust the face. Let's add another adjustment layer. So let's click this little icon, curves again. Let's click on the thumbnail. And now I just would like to make this part of her face brighter. I'm not going to darken this part. I just want to make the left hand side of her face a little bit brighter as well, her hand, her neck, and the rest of her body. So let's focus on the face first. So I'm going to use the targeted adjustment tool and click on this area, as I want to brighten this kind of tones in the image. And now I'm just going to, when I clicked, I'm holding the cursor and I'm just dragging up. This way the tones that I want to affect in her face are brightening. Let's keep an eye on the histogram. We don't have clipping yet, which is good. Now I want to make it a little less strong, so I'm going to push this point a little bit towards the bottom of the graph. Let's now mask that part of the face that I just made brighter. So again, I'm clicking on the mask, inverting the mask by pressing Command I, and I will be painting the same as with the eyes, with the soft white brush only over these areas that I want to brighten. So the opacity 20 is fine. There is no need to make it higher. Here, only touch those areas which you would like to highlight. Don't move over whole body, because we still want to keep it three-dimensional. We want to keep the shadows. At the moment we are only making the highlights stronger. We are creating more distinction in the image. Okay. Now it's time to adjust tones in the model's body. So let's create another adjustment layer, curves, and now let's sample on the brightest and on the darkest area, as I would like to introduce more contrast in the body. At the moment it's pretty flat. I would like to have more light and more shadow. So with the targeted adjustment tool, I'm going to sample on the brightest area, and the second point I want to sample will be the darkest point, so maybe something around here. Okay, now let's push the first point. So we are going to brighten her body, and let's move the second point a little, very little bit down. Maybe it's not necessary. Let's see. Yes, I think there is no need to push this one too strongly. Okay, so let's now mask this adjustment layer in order to have it applied only to selected parts of the body. So having the mask selected, I'm pressing Command I again, and I will be painting with a white brush over the black mask. Opacity 20 can be a little bit too much. Let's try with 20. It's actually fine. So just remember, at the moment I'm just introducing highlights. Let's paint over these parts that we would like to stand out stronger, just to make a little bit three-dimensional look to her body. The same goes for the hand. I'm going to zoom in because I don't want to affect the background. I just want to very slightly go over the brightest parts of her fingers in order to, I'm going to drop opacity to 10 to work on the hand. Just pressed 1 on the keyboard, so it has changed to 10. So I'm just bringing out brightest part in her hand. I don't want to affect the shadows. Okay. Okay, so the adjustment layer for the body is ready. Let's now add another one that will be mostly focusing on the hair, as I would like to bring out some nice highlights in her hair. So similarly as with the previous steps, let's add another adjustment layer, curves, and now let's sample from the hair. I'm going to get the targeted adjustment tool and sample around this area, maybe somewhere in the mid-tones, and now in the highlights, which will be around here. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit and let's focus on the hair for the moment. Let's see what happens if I start pushing this point up. It's brightening the brightest parts in the image, and let's push this one. This one is actually getting me the result that I wanted. I wanted to bring out the texture of her hair. Previously the contrast was pretty strong and all the fine details were lost. So by pushing the darkest point up, by brightening it, I was able to achieve those nice highlights. Obviously I will mask them in the next step. I don't want the whole hair to get that bright, but these highlights are going to be very, very nice in this black and white conversion. So let's click on the mask thumbnail. We are going now to invert the mask and paint again with the white brush. Let's try to go very, very slightly over this part. Opacity 10 is more than enough. We don't need bigger value, as I just want to bring out those highlights. I just want to make this particular area a little bit brighter. I don't want to affect the whole hair. So like this, it's fine. And remember that if you go several times with the same opacity adjustment, it adds up. So if I have the brush set at 50, it will just give me immediately very, very strong brush stroke. I prefer to work with smaller amounts and to build up the effects that I want in a more subtle way. I have that way more control over the whole process. Let's toggle on and off this layer. It's fine. Let's add a little bit of these highlights, this part of hair as well. The same as previously in these edits, I'm working very, very quickly. I just want to show you the ideas behind those adjustments. You can spend much more time and fine-tune all those adjustments if you wish. Okay, so we have the hair done. Now let's darken the background, which will allow us to bring out the face of the model to make this portrait much more striking. So let's add another adjustment layer, curves. Okay, selecting the thumbnail, and let's now select again the targeted adjustment tool, and I will now work with the image directly. So sampling here, I'm clicking and now dragging down. Okay, I would like to still have a little bit of this texture of the background visible. I don't want to lose all these details, so I guess value around here will be perfect for this image. And now let's mask it. So let's introduce the darker shade only in that part of the image on the left hand side. I want to make it less strong here and to have still the shape of her head nicely defined. So let's invert the mask again, and now let's paint with the white brush. The opacity now we can go for around 30, so I pressed 3 on the keyboard, and let's just paint over these areas that we want to darken. Be careful, don't go too far on her hair. I'm working fast, so I'm not worrying about this. However, we introduce these nice highlights in her hair. Don't damage it now by painting over with this adjustment layer, with this effect that will darken overall the whole background, the whole image. Okay, so let's move a little bit downwards. Let's make this part a little bit darker, stronger. Okay, you can see this trick always works, always by darkening the background. Of course, in the original image, it's good if the background was actually dark. By deepening the tone of the background, by darkening it, the model will always stand out stronger. It's a very important thing to remember that when we are looking at images, our eye always will go to the brightest areas. So now we have this beautiful, really strong highlights in her eyes. They are capturing our attention. Then we have this nice light over her face and over her hand. And if the background would be bright, like this, or even bright, or if it was white, the impact of this image would be much less striking. So let's get back to this layer. Let's make it brighter. I think around these values would be fine. Let's now add another adjustment layer that will introduce a little bit more contrast to the whole image. So let's go again to this little icon, let's press curves, and having this thumbnail selected, let's now try to introduce this classic S curve that will brighten the highlights in the image and darken the shadows. Remember to keep your eye on the histogram, and we can always adjust this layer, we can always work on it further on the mask. At the moment I'm after just increasing a bit contrast in the image. As you can see on the histogram, we have still a little bit of the highlights missing, so I can actually push this white point slider towards the left hand side, and that way I will just maximize the highlights in the image. I don't want to lose the texture of her skin though. I think at this point it's maximum. I don't want to push too far. Okay, the image is looking really good. Let's see if we can get back to the layer that was adjusting highlights in her body. Let's see if we can make these highlights even a little bit stronger. Now I have the opacity 30, just to make the contrast between the darker part of her body and those highlights a little bit less strong, to make it more harmonious. So the same goes for the face, and we can touch the hair again in a very subtle way. As I have mentioned before, when I was darkening the background, I darkened the hair. This should be actually corrected. So now I'm going to be painting on this mask with a white color. No, actually with a black color. So I'm swapping the samples and having the opacity set at 60. I pressed 6 on the keyboard. I'm just going to go over this part to have the hair a little bit brighter, and now swapping colors again, pressing X on the keyboard just to fix this part a little bit. Okay, let's now sharpen our image. So as you remember, we should select the highest layer in our layer stack. So let's create the stamp, the favorite keyboard shortcut, Alt Command Shift E. Now we have the stamp layer created. Let's zoom in as I will sharpen the image, and mostly I would like to sharpen the eyes. So having the layer selected, it's important to change the blend mode of this layer to overlay. And now let's move over to the Photoshop menu bar. Let's select Filter and Other, High Pass. The value 1 can be a little bit too little for the eyes. Let's try to push it a little bit further. Maybe 2 is too far. So maybe around 1.7. Yes, I'm going to go for this value. So I'm pressing OK. And now, since I want to have this sharpening effect applied only on chosen areas of this image, I'm going to mask this layer. So I have this layer selected. By pressing Alt and the mask symbol, I'm creating black mask for this image. And now I need to have the soft brush selected, white color, opacity much stronger than 10. I'm going to go for 60. So I'm pressing 6 on the keyboard, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit and just go over her eyes, which will apply the high pass effect. Okay, very nice. I can apply it as well a bit over the hair, mostly on the eyes, a little bit over the cigarette, over the hand. Just sharpen the most important key elements in the image. Okay, that way we have finished our conversion. I'm very happy with the final result. I really like the black and white vintage cinematic look that I have achieved for this image. Remember, you can spend more time, you can play around with these details, you can still work more on brightening parts of the eyes, darkening maybe the eyebrows a little bit. I'm just going very quickly to show you the possibilities that are available with these techniques. And let's just have a last look at the original image that we were working with and at the final result. Okay, thank you for watching. If you liked the tutorial, have a look at the whole course. Enjoy and see you soon!